Disseminate, the computer science research podcast.
Hello and welcome to Disseminate, the computer science research podcast. Today's episode is going to be slightly different to the usual episode, and we're going to be exploring a topic that's really important to how we build trust in scientific results and the scientific process, and that is artifact evaluation. Specifically, we'll be talking about a recent paper that is titled Lessons Learned from 5 Years of Artifact Evaluations at EUROSYS. And I'm sure a lot of our listeners know what EUROSYS is as a conference, but for those who don't, EUROSYS is a leading European conference that covers a whole wide range of computer systems, of aspects of computer systems, from operating systems all the way up to embedded systems, databases, networks, and storage, a whole range of topics at EUROSYS. And yeah, so the paper was co-authored by several of the guests I've got on the show today, actually, and who were the artifact evaluation co-chairs from the years of 2021 to 2025. And they're going to be talking today about their collective experience, reflects on what worked for them, what hasn't over that time period, and how looking forward, how the process can be improved and we can evolve things to better support artifact evaluation in systems research. So welcome, guys. I'll let you introduce yourselves if you want to go around one by one, if you want to kick things off, Thaleia.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, my name is Thaleia Doudali. I am an assistant professor at IMDEA Software Institute in Spain, and I was one of the artifact evaluation co-chairs in 2025.
Miguel, do you want to jump in now?
Yes, sure. So, hi everyone. Thanks for having us, Jack. So, I am Miguel Matos. I'm an associate professor at IST Lisbon and a researcher at INESC-ID. And I was the artifact evaluation co-chair in 2024.
Anjo, you're up.
Hi, I'm Anjo. I'm a researcher at Intel Labs, and I was the co-chair in 2022.
Fantastic. Well, I just want to say again, thank you all, three of you, taking time out of your busy days to come and talk about artifacts evaluation. So I'm going to kick things off with a nice softball and ask you to explain what artifact evaluation is and why it's so important. And then I'm going to get out of the way and let you three guys discuss the topic. So yeah, what is artifact evaluation and why is it important?
Awesome. I will take upon that. So artifact evaluation is a voluntary process that promotes the reproducibility and reusability of scientific work. So the process is that we submit papers in conferences like the one in EUROSYS, and alongside the paper, we also submit the artifact, the software that was built to create the scientific results produced in the paper. So the software, the data, the documentation, how to run it, how to execute the code, how to replicate some of the results in the paper. And this artifact evaluation process benefits a lot the scientific community because it really encourages the reproducibility of the results, open sourcing the software, and enables researchers to build upon, to compare against, and to extend the prior work. And this is something extremely useful in systems research. And for authors in particular, it increases their visibility and their impact of their contribution by making it easier to reuse and validate their scientific results in their paper.
Yes, exactly. So this is we have been working on kind of refining this process over the different editions, and currently, so this is a voluntary process. No authors are not highly encouraged to participate, but it's completely voluntary. And the process essentially goes in 3 phases. So after the authors know that the paper is accepted at the conference, they can apply to the artifact evaluation. So they submit their artifact, which is typically the source code plus maybe benchmarks and data sets if relevant. They submit also the main paper that has been already approved by the PC committee of the main conference, and then they also add an appendix that explains how to reproduce the main claims of the paper. So artifact evaluation does not entail necessarily having to reproduce every single result, because sometimes for many different reasons that we can go on and discuss a little bit, it's not possible. But essentially the authors identify, so these are the main claims, the key results that should be reproduced, and they submit this to the artifact evaluation process. And then there is an intermediate phase, which we call the kick the tires phase, And this is essentially a warm-up phase where the reviewers can check the artifact for basic functionality. So is this properly documented? Is there a README? Does this compiles? Can I run very simple demonstration case? And this allows us to flag early issues and interact with the authors if necessary to ask them, please, this is not running, fix this before us retrying. And then the final phase is the evaluation itself, where the reviewers are essentially going to attempt to verify, to assess the artifact for completeness, for documentation, the building process, and the ability to reproduce the main claims of the paper. Usually, artifacts are reviewed by 3 or 4 evaluators, and then this goes as an usual conference, right? There is a discussion phase, and then based on the discussion of the reviewers and the reviewers' feedbacks and comments, we will award them the relevant badges. And I will leave the floor to Anjo to explain those badges.
Yes. So the entire goal of this process is to eventually award badges. There are various standards for badges because we are or EUROSYS is an ACM conference. We follow their policies and guidelines. And early on, the systems community has sort of agreed to three badges for now. That's the artifact available badge, the artifacts functional badge, and then there is a results reproduced badge. And they sort of stack in sort of complexity of evaluation after each badge. The available badge is basically that there is a DUI, so a tracker for the artifact, and that it's actually publicly released. Just helps it make it easy to find, I guess. But it does not say much about the functionality. That's what the functional badge is about. So there we're checking for, or the evaluators are checking for the completeness, whether it's well documented, and it's actually working, right? So it's the first badge that the artifact is executed on. And then the most complex badge to receive is the reproduced badge, where basically the authors have to describe what the main claims of the papers are, and the evaluators then have to perform the same or similar experiments to identify whether the results in the paper are actually able to be reproduced. It might be on a different system. It might be with support from the authors on the same system. Really depends on how the evaluation goes. And based on the evaluation, the respective badges would be awarded, and then they're typically displayed on the conference site in the ACM Literature Library, or on various websites, author websites in the paper, to demonstrate that this paper has been awarded those badges, right? So it's a really nice byproduct of for the paper as well.
Cool. So that really sets the background well then for kind of what artifact evaluation is, and all the badges, and learning about all the various phases and how we go and accumulate those badges and get those badges. So as I said at the very top of the show, you guys have been working on this for like around 5 years, between 2021 and 2025. So tell us about your insights then. So I'll come to you first on this, Miguel. Give us an overview of the trends you've seen over the last 5 years.
Sure. So this essentially involves all of the co-shares of these past 5 editions. So it was a lot of work, and the way we approached this was to be as systematic as possible, given the data we have available, and to support our analysis and the main conclusions that we have on the paper, and that all of us will be happy to discuss here. So we collected data from multiple sources over these past five editions. So this includes the official conference proceedings to get what badges there are, the sysartifacts.github.io website, which is the official site for the sysartifacts evaluation, not only for EUROSYS, but also for other systems conferences. So this is probably interesting to link to this site in the show notes as well for the interested listeners. And then we also developed some internal tooling to crunch and collect and scrape all of these data. And we did things like check on GitHub what are the usage metrics, the stars, how many pulls and pull requests and those kinds of things from GitHub. GitHub has been used for source code, but typically we also strive to have a permanent place, a digital repository for this. Zenodo is a good example of such a repository. And that we also use these data sources to understand how these artifacts are being used and shared with the community, how many downloads we have over the years, and so on. So the data set is not tons of data, but we already have some reasonable numbers that allow us to support our conclusions and to identify mostly, and this is one of the things that I find interesting about this work that we did together, to identify the trends and the recurring patterns. So to give you just a very brief overview of the numbers we are talking about. So roughly 60% of the papers that have been accepted at the conference participated in the artifact evaluation process. So this is a number we want to increase, but let's discuss this later. And of these papers that applied, again, 60% roughly of all the papers that have been accepted, we have awarded 161 artifacts available. So this means that the code and data sets and so on are available for the community to try. Out of these 161, 136 they are deemed functional, so they got the functional badge as Anjo explained before, and 75 artifacts were awarded the results reproduced badge, which means that we were able, or the reviewers rather, were able to reproduce the claims made on the paper. So this is lots of work. It's very challenging because we have to deal with many different things. And maybe, Thaleia, you want to talk a little bit about that?
So it's interesting to see that we have had an increasing interest in people participating in the Artifact Evaluation Committee. So every year there is a call for participation. So we encourage self-nominations from primarily PhD students, junior, senior ones, to participate in the committee of the evaluators. And over the years, we've seen an increase in interest, and especially last year, 2025, this year, but it started from last year, the preparation. We had double the size of the committee. So the committee was consisting of 98 members, which is great to see the increasing interest, but it's also challenging to handle this large number of committees. But regardless, it is a testament to the increased interest in the researchers wanting to participate in the evaluation. We had reviewers from institutions across the world, Europe, USA, Asia, even though the conference is, the European Conference on Computer Systems, but it's a testament to how much of a leading conference it is in systems research. So this shows that the number of evaluators is large, and the interest in participating has increased as evaluators. And then we had some interesting facts. Anjo, do you want to go ahead and talk about those?
Yeah. So I was mainly interested in finding out more about the artifacts itself and how and if they're being used. So for that, we sort of looked at all the submitted artifact URLs, which initially were GitHub only, so repositories mainly, and later on it used to be GitHub DYs, typically from Zenodo or Figshare, just to find out, are those artifacts, for example, still available? And we basically found out that nearly all of them are still, in one form or another, are still available. So even 5 years down the road, people are not deleting their repositories or removing there's a number of entries. We found one entry, but it's a single instance, right, out of 161. So it's a relatively minor, I would say. And then in terms of usage, we looked at GitHub stars, forks. Zenodo has sort of downloads, and I think views is the other category. And there it really varies, right? You have artifacts that are barely accessed, but then some of them are downloaded hundreds of times, have hundreds of forks, and really quite a bit of traffic, and are still maintained. So they receive still updates. Also something that we have been looking at. So it's quite interesting to see sort of that kind of data and how research artifacts continue to be used. Of course, I mean, the older the artifact, the more likelihood there is that there is more more views, more forks, more stars on GitHub. So generally, I think sort of a good study of impact of these artifacts.
Yeah, definitely. I was going to say then that when they come around to determining sort of the most impactful paper, the test of time sort of award for a given paper review, this would be a good useful input into that, right? Well, it's still been used 10 years later, right, and it still works. So that's quite a good indicator that it's had some impact, right?
Yes. So I don't think that we will have an impact on the test of time paper, because that's typically based on sort of research value, not necessarily the artifact, but something that at least among us we have been discussing is whether we need a test of time award in 5 years of time for an artifact, right? So maybe
incentivize people to keep maintaining it as well, right? But yeah, sure. Cool. I guess given that, then let's talk about challenges and some like proposals maybe then for future. That's a nice segue into the next section of the conversation. So Thaleia, I'll let you take the lead on this section.
Yeah, it was interesting that we, most of the chairs, we had this discussion about what was the most challenging part over our service. And there were things that were coming up every year, the same challenge again and again. And the primary one is that we have a very, very tight timeline to work on. And this is part of many reasons. So essentially, the whole process of evaluating, submitting and evaluating those artifacts happens between the paper acceptance when the decisions are out and the camera ready deadline, because the final version of the artifact and the artifact appendix need to be part of the final version of the paper. So everything needs to be done between those two dates. And this essentially is like 2-3 weeks of a time. So it's very, very tight, and it leaves very little room for, things to be done properly. But regardless, this is particularly the case because EUROSYS as a conference recently switched to a dual submission deadline. So essentially during 1 year, there are 2 submission deadlines, one in the fall and one in the spring. So for EUROSYS 2025, we had a spring deadline in 2024 and a fall deadline again in 2024 for the papers to appear in 2025. So essentially, this is the timeline. It's hard to extend it because of all the other deadlines, submission deadline for the program committee to review the papers. So we have to work with that tight timeline. So essentially what we propose, because this is a consistent challenge across the years, we propose that the authors essentially start preparing their artifact early on, even upon submission time. Essentially, we would like to have authors have their artifact ready when the decisions are out, even though these are negative or positive. Even in the case that we have a negative, like a rejection, this process of preparing the artifact is very useful because the paper will be submitted in another venue and the artifact will be ready regardless. So short term, we really want to motivate the authors to have their artifacts ready because there is no time to properly prepare an artifact during this very tight timeline. There is only time to communicate with the reviewers if things are not working properly and there are like small fixes that need to be done. But there's in 1 week, you cannot properly prepare an artifact. And then long term, there is discussion among the chairs, and this is something that we want to discuss further with the steering committee and the community about making the process mandatory, so that every author knows that I submit a paper, I should also submit an artifact to reproduce the claims. And this is something that would be extremely beneficial. And of course, it's a very complicated decision. So this is something that we propose to the community to discuss.
Yes, and another challenge that we identified, and picking this issue of communication that Thaleia raises, related also with the communication between the committee of the main conference and the committee of the artifact evaluation conference. So as we said before, these are separated processes, and the committees are built independently. So on the main conference, usually there are very senior researchers. On the artifact evaluation, there are junior researchers. Sometimes I would say a big chunk of those reviewers are PhD students. And therefore, there are all sorts of differences in experience and expectations about what the artifact evaluation should be about. And this is, in fact, a challenge that we identified over the past few editions in a quite consistent manner, which is, so there are many or several mismatched expectations about what results should be reproduced. For instance, the authors might think that those are our key results. The PC members of the main conference should think that there might be some differences there. And then the reviewers of the artifact evaluation can also have a different understanding of this. And this is something we find out, and then this creates all sorts of friction that we also want to address over the coming years. So in the short term, and what we want to propose is to introduce an informal communication channel between those two committees that again have different experience, different seniorities, and different timelines and periods where they work, to have the reviewers, for instance, flag very clearly what claims should be reproduced and at which level of detail, and then this information could be passed down to the reviewers of the artifact evaluation. So this is something that we believe should be achievable in the short term and do not create too much overhead on either side of the process. Over the long term, our goal is to kind of formalize this connection and require authors early on, so at submission time, say, to declare which claims are the main claims and which claims they plan to be supported experimentally by the artifact. And this would allow us allow the reviewers of the main conference to validate that list. And then, of course, this is always an iterative process, and maybe propose adjustments to the authors that the authors can react accordingly when preparing their artifact. And the goal here is essentially for us to have a good match between the expectations of both committees, because we believe this is good for the authors, that they know already beforehand what they should target in terms of reproducibility of the results, and also for the reviewers on the artifact evaluation, because they have a clear list of things to be checked against.
And let me take the next point. So based on the numbers that Miguel mentioned earlier, only half of the submissions actually are reproduced, or their results are reproduced. And one of the major drivers of that is actually the use of specialized hardware in our community. So you may need a special server with certain capabilities, but it can be much, much worse, right? You may need an Android phone. It needs to be physically present, and you can imagine sort of all sorts of craziness going on in the systems community, just because we are building new things. And I think it gets even worse if hardware is involved, because then sometimes export control issues also arise, depending on which country and students are coming from. So all of this makes it very hard to sort of scale reproducibility, and we've sort of seen this over and over again. I think the current solution is only sort of a short-term fix where we try to ask authors for what the requirements are, whether they can share their hardware through SSH. But it's sort of very limiting to then assign only a few subset reviewers that may have the same hardware available. So it's a bit problematic. In the long term, we need to find, I think, better systems to share and be able to reproduce those results, which is certainly not easy.
Absolutely. And moving on to the next challenge that we identified is the fact that the artifact evaluation chairs and the reviewers, they change every year. And this is not the case, for example, for the technical program committee. You know, in the program committee, the chairs change every year, but reviewers repeat, especially senior reviewers. Typically, they repeat in the committee for many years. But this is not the case for artifact evaluation. The chair change every year, and also the reviewers. Usually, PhD students maybe participate in those committees for 1-2 times, but then they don't. So we have to, redo a lot of things and relearn a lot of knowledge. So what we propose is to kind of mimic the program committee and establish some sort of steering committee. That could be consisting of people that have served as artifact evaluation chairs in the past. This could be also done potentially across systems conference to help transfer knowledge, because essentially it's the same process across the different systems conferences. Another proposal would be to prolong the service duration, for example, having chairs to serve for more than 1 year, but of course that is complicated and puts more load to them. But essentially, we need some sort of solution to be able to transfer knowledge, to maintain best practices, to also work on the challenges that we mentioned so far, so that essentially we get solutions. So we need some sort of a steering committee or some sort of having a group of people to transfer the knowledge across years. And again, with the committee, it is important that the chairs create evaluation committees with both junior and more senior members, that with people that have expertise in reviewing artifacts, and also allowing, of course, younger researchers to enter the service.
Exactly. So, and another thing that we also identified, and it was honestly quite a surprise to, I guess, to all of us, is that even if we have the artifacts on the DOI-backed platforms, which are designed to be long-term, ensuring that the artifacts remain there over the long term is not trivial. And in fact, we found a few cases where some artifacts were removed after they get the badges, which is of course something we don't want to happen, right? Because the badges should mean something very, very precise. So this is more a technical aspect, but over the short term, what we plan to do and to propose is to require that all artifacts are indeed stored in these DOI-backed platforms, such as Znode or Figshare, but also restrict deletions without previous approval from either this steering committee that Thaleia mentioned, or the committee that is active during that year, or the original committee when the award was given. So this is still, the details are not very clear to us, but this is definitely something that we want to make sure that artifacts remain available, and this gives credence and credibility to the badges, right? And of course, over the long term, we also want to refine these. And when authors submit the paper, to also declare explicitly, and this is related with the point already discussed earlier, which results are reproducible when the paper is submitted, and then this would get in the camera ready as well. So this would allow us a better quality control and making sure that if there is a badge, it's meaningful when the badge was awarded, which is the case nowadays, but should also be meaningful over the long term.
The last 2 points that Thaleia and Miguel raised, I think, are making the point that I'm going to raise even sort of worse, right? So we have sort of the short-term stewardship of AE chairs and even evaluators, and then some of the sort of long-term or descriptions in the artifact are not quite ideal yet. But in combination with that, the badge definitions themselves, the language is a bit imprecise. So it needs quite a bit of guidance, especially for new evaluators, to understand, especially for the reproducibility badge or also for the functional badge, to understand what they are supposed to check. And sort of ideally you want evaluations between two artifacts to be equally harsh on them, right? Because otherwise one paper may receive a badge, the other doesn't, but was not properly vetted, right? So neither the authors of the paper, of the artifact, nor the evaluator sort of have a positive experience in that case.
Yes, exactly. And one thing that we can also discuss is the fact that so all of these indefinitions hurt, but on the bright side, I think we can say that the artifact evaluation has become kind of standard practice in systems research. So in the SIS artifacts site that we mentioned before, besides EUROSYS, we also have there, for instance, SOSP and OSDI that also participate in this process with the differences that are relevant for each community, of course. But what we also identified and discussed in our internal meetings when thinking about this and building these results is that this practice is still very widely across different computer science subfields. So some domains prioritize availability over reproducibility, and there are certainly merits on that. Others, like machine learning and HPC, they have separate reproducibility challenge. So it's kind of a different way to do this. What we have tried to do over the past few years is to develop in EUROSYS kind of a blueprint to allow the systems oriented community to improve in this artifact evaluation process, because all of us believe that this is very relevant and critical for science in general, and also for the industry as well. And so my feeling, and I think my colleagues share this feeling as well, is that so this is a step in the way. There is still lots of work to do, as we discussed earlier, and our end goal, I would say, is to make these more inclusive, more consistent, and more aligned with the realities of modern research requirements that have different challenges, and I think we will discuss this, but when we go deeper and think about this, there are many challenges that are still present nowadays, and that we want to do our small contribution to improve upon.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, from what you guys were saying there, I mean, there are a lot of challenges outstanding still, but the direction of travel is going in the right place, right? Things are going in the right direction. Even from afar, you can sort of see that the things are moving towards a better future. And a lot of the proposals you mentioned there are really sort of appealing as well. And you can see how they would help, and things like standardization across different subfields and CS definitely would help as well. So yeah, I think the next section of the podcast, let's let's do some reflecting, more broader reflection on your time sort of working with artifacts evaluation. So let's focus on sort of what your advice would be for future authors, reviewers, or chairs, or people involved with artifact evaluation in the community. So Thaleia, you kick us off. What for authors maybe? What would authors? What advice have you got for them?
Absolutely. I think for authors, my advice is to start preparing the artifact early, ideally before you even know if the paper is accepted or not, because this is a process that will be useful regardless of the outcome. And think of your artifact as part of the contribution, not just an afterthought. So write code, ideally open source it, after the acceptance, of course, if needed. Try to write clear documentation, automate scripts that will help the evaluators run seamlessly the code. A well-structured appendix really, really helps, and make sure that your work is reusable and reproducible. And really this effort put into preparing the artifact will pay off tremendously after that.
Yeah, definitely. I echo that sentiment. Miguel, how about reviewers? What advice have you got for them?
Yeah, so even if the artifact is very well prepared, reviewing is a lot of work, but I think it's very valuable work. So my advice would be for reviewers willing to participate in this process in the future editions to approach these with a collaborative mindset. So the goal is not just to put a check on the CV that I did this and checking boxes. This plot is exactly the same in the paper. This is not what we aim to do, right? But also be helpful to authors and help them improve the quality and the impact of the research. Because today you are a reviewer, you will learn in the process, and next year, hopefully, you will be an author going under this process. So this is something we also try to encourage reviewers to think about, to be constructive, to communicate clearly, and sometimes remembering that small fixes, small suggestions in the artifact can make a big difference towards our goal of having better reproducibility.
Yeah, definitely. Mindset is very important. Anjo, for future chairs, what would you say to them?
I mean, get in touch with us. That's one thing. I think having continuity is sort of growing, right? The knowledge that is instilled in this process is important. Similar to how people have learned how to run conferences over hundreds of years, right? I think generally over the past few years, we have invested quite a bit of time in templates for the artifact appendix, in guides for authors, for reviewers, checklists, just to sort of help make this process as easy and as similar as possible. But of course, those documents aren't perfect, right? We're trying to improve them over time, and I hope future chairs will sort of pick up on that work and continue to evolve the process, but also the documentation to make it even easier for the evaluation community at the end.
Yeah, definitely keep iterating right towards a better future. Cool. So speaking of the future, then that's a nice segue into the next question I've got, and that's we get our crystal ball out. We want to look 5 years in the future. What does artifacts evaluation look like, Thaleia?
Yeah, it's interesting because already 5 years have passed. So I'm very curious to see in the next 5 years what will happen. But I really believe that the artifact evaluation process will be more standardized and more of a the authors will be incentivized to participate, because right now, to be honest, the percentage of participation is quite low. Only half of the accepted papers, around 60% of the accepted papers, participate in the process of artifact evaluation, and even less, even half of them actually get the reproducible badge. So I would really, really like this number to increase, and I really hope it will do. And it's more of like a mentality change. It's more of a mentality where we write code, we document it well, we make it runnable, we make it reproducible. We ideally open source the code, and the community can build upon and extend that work. And this is very, very important in systems research, because we, as program committee members, we always ask the reviewers to compare their system with all the other prior systems that existed and show that it's best. So we need code to do that. We need open source code and runnable code to properly evaluate the new systems that we propose. So I hope that we will get to that point in the next 5 years.
Yes, so this is my wish as well, and something I would really like to see happening, to go from these roughly 60% to a big number. So of course, there are always very valid and legitimate reasons that some papers or some systems cannot undergo this process. So there are industry-related restrictions. That is this amazing paper, and the authors want to do a startup with it. So this is a perfectly valid reason as well. But I believe that increasing substantially the number of papers that go through this process would benefit not only the authors themselves today, because they will have better code, better documented and so on, that they can themselves build upon a better foundation, but also picking the point that Thaleia was mentioning. So this makes it not very easy, but easier for other people to reuse the work and build upon it. And one of the pains that, well, I love working in systems, right? That's why I'm here, in part. But one of the pains, and I think this is shared with everyone that I mentioned, is how hard sometimes is to make someone else's system run in a consistent and fair way. And I think this is a big challenge in our community. And having most of the artifacts available, I think, would be very, very available, to be clear, to go through this process and get the badges that they merit, would very, very much help this effort and would benefit everyone, in my opinion.
Okay, so from my side, I think I'm a bit more pessimistic. I think both of your points are very valid, and I hope that it happens in this way. But I think especially in the last 2 years, EUROSYS has seen an explosion of 50-60% of more submissions, and acceptance has gone up in a similar range for papers. So this leads sort of to me worrying about how we scale, right? Thaleia was already mentioning we have 100 evaluator committee, right? Huge size. And every one of them is spending to reproduce an artifact probably 20, 30 hours of their time to evaluate that artifact, and sometimes maybe even more. So I think what I would like to see over the next few years is a way of sort of automating, scaling the artifact evaluation process to be able to cope with, EUROSYS accepting 200 papers and us evaluating 200 papers. Because I think the current system is not completely set up for that. And it leads to quite a bit of work, both on the chair and the evaluator side, to sort of steer that process. So ideally, we find better ways to do it.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, I think that sort of brings our podcast to an end. We should probably reconvene in 5 years and do another state of play and see where things are at, and see if any of the predictions have come true. But yeah, thank you very much for joining me today, folks. It's been a really insightful chat, and I'm sure the listener will have absolutely loved the conversation as well. I'll drop links to everything in the show notes, so you can go and check everything out. And yeah, thanks again, guys. I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thanks. It was very fun. Bye-bye.